Hi, Friday evening. Okay, so we've had some good comments on this one. Before I open that and talk about it, I just want to show you and remind you that this kit really is just the equivalent of one of these small kits. Smallest kit, virtually the same box size, just a bit longer because the fuselage is longer. So really this kit was intended, does it have a series number on it? No, well, not that I'm seeing. Oh, series 3. This is not supposed to be anything advanced. This is really a very simple kit. But it's quite nice because you're getting a longer aircraft and quite nice wingspan on a pretty simple kit, which was what I liked about this, which I'll get to, that HS125 which I was talking about. So, really this is sort of intended, it should have been intended to be very widely built, and that you would have seen a lot of these. But have you ever seen one on a table anywhere? Have you ever seen a photo of a built Caravelle? I've never seen one built. I've never seen anyone that's got one. Never, nothing. So point one there is airliners weren't as popular, of course. So the likelihood of a kid buying one is questionable. But build-wise and what you're getting as a kit, it's really just on a par with the most basic of kits, but more wheels, 2 engines to build. You've got the windows to insert. So this should be something that I can build now after all that time without going to town on it. But with that issue of the windows which I talked about, and I remember this back in the 70s and 80s even, I would be building, there were a couple of airliners which I'd got, and I'd put these windows in, and it was either you couldn't get them in properly, or like this one, when they are in, they're very recessed, and it was like, I remember thinking, well, that's like a bit of a cheat. Is that the best they could do for you? They couldn't get that right. I mean, how difficult is it to mold it a little bit thicker so that it can actually reach the extremity of the fuselage? But anyway, I mean, whatever Airfix was doing in those years was that they were sort of willing to just let that go. And I guess for most kids, nobody cared. You had windows in and it was good enough. But the more weird thing about this kit was the fact that I don't know if anyone would have ever got the decals right. I'm talking about emerging modelers, somebody that was buying the kit within their first few years of being a modeler as a kid. And I don't blame Airfix for the nature of how they've designed that, but they might as well not have put the windows on there in the first place, or maybe they were just thinking, well, if you don't get the decals right, at least you got a fuselage with windows in, which would have looked a bit weird if you didn't have that. But if you do manage to get the decal on, then you can't see your windows. So now what? So, okay, so a couple of the comments is paint the stripe on the fuselage. And then what I thought when I read that comment was, well, what if you paint the stripe and then put the decal over the stripe so that you can then attempt to clean up through the windows, and if you crackle a little bit on the decals, it's a little bit of hopeful thinking there that the amount of crackling would be very minimal. You've got the blue painted part underneath. Now it's not just one color. It's got the lighter blue. It's probably better if I show you. It's got the lighter blue edges to that dark blue stripe, and it's got a white stripe in the middle. So it's not the simplest thing. But that's starting to make this kit a little bit more advanced, and I'm looking at it from the emerging modeler's point of view. But then I looked at this part, which is the nose, and then I realized that actually they don't provide decal for that for good reason. It's a complex curve, but that means you'd have to paint that anyway. So at some point here, you're going to have a place where your decal ends and you would have had to paint over that. So painting that stripe is looking like more reasonable. And I'd like to actually try and have one Sud Aviation Caravelle that is built just acceptably. Not competition level, just acceptably. But I still don't have an answer for, well, okay, how well do you do the windows? And I don't really want, to be honest, I'm just going to put them in. I'm just going to put them in. They don't reach to the surface, but I can only do that after I've obviously filed through on the decals. And we're just going to see what this model looks like. And I think it can be done fairly well. But for a kid doing this, I mean, they would glue the windows in because that's what the instruction says. They'd put the decals over. You'd be covering up all your windows. You'd get dimples on your decals, which may have given you silvering because the windows don't come to the surface. But anyway, let's see what we can do. It would have been nice if Airfix had done a bit of a better job on windows in those years. So I was talking about this one. The box top is somewhere, and I was noting that this, and I can't remember if I mentioned the Lysander is also the Lysander is probably, along with the Buccaneer, my top, and this one, the top three. But anyway, this is certainly one of my best ever kits. And then I was looking at this one. Now I can't remember the reasons for the choice over Matchbox at the time, other than probably availability. I suspect that the Matchbox was just available, this one wasn't available. But looking at it now, why was this one so good? And I want to show you this, especially from the point of view of an emerging modeler. Okay, so very simple cockpit, a few windows to put in, basic halves to put together, nothing fancy, not the simplest of model. I mean, it's not a Spitfire with 10 parts. It's got a bit more, but you know, that's all there is. Which is why, as a kid, I could build this. Nothing was difficult on it, and you were able to achieve a very nice model, as opposed to, and I've never built one of these, as opposed to Airfix's box full of stuff. An absolute box full of stuff for the same aircraft. More interior stuff. Oh, okay. It looks like some of these things don't belong to this kit because I just spotted that. So it is possible that the Airfix... Well, hold on now. Oh, I don't know. Okay, this looks like a bit of a mix of parts. And in fact, is that the Jetstream? Yeah, okay. That's not the HS125. That's the Jetstream. Okay, so it's just in a different box. Well, that's slightly odd because I thought I was going to build the Airfix HS125. Well, that explains that then. So I still need to get myself the Airfix HS125. because this is not the right model in that box, and it wasn't me that did that. I do like that color scheme. This one was okay, no, that was only on the box. Probably very, very similar. Very, you know, not bad at all. So I'd like to try and get that one. But I'm going to build the Matchbox one. Not a difficult build at all. I'm going to be doing that one hopefully this year. Do like that. And the plastic colors were appealing. Okay. I sprayed the vampire, but I did two things wrong. And I got away with one of them, and I partially got away with the other one. So it is a cold and wet day here, and it's in fact raining or drizzling outside. Spraying when it's drizzling inevitably means you're going to get a little bit of water droplets depending on how humid the air is in your spray, and I do get that occasionally. But being in New Zealand, it's like, which is probably similar to UK, you can't really avoid the damp days, and I don't have a water trap on my compressor, so that's sort of something I need to upgrade. I didn't get water droplets spraying now, which is good, but I have had it before, and it's really annoying because it can mess up your paint job. The second thing that I did wrong, and I have spoken about this, and I still make these mistakes because I'm a little bit in a rush. I didn't check the, I assumed that the strength of coloration, because it was a dark blue that I sprayed, I'm going for that French Navy scheme. I'm not using the black blue, I'm using a dark blue, but it's not even that black blue. I thought the paint was strong enough, it's a gloss paint, thought it was strong enough to cover that silver plastic with its odd detail lines. There isn't even that great a variation in what I needed to cover, but that blue was not. I had to spray quite a bit, and I got away with it mostly. It's not perfect, but it doesn't have to be perfect on a kit that really I'm just putting back together for the sake of having that kit back on the shelf, being one of my early 80s kits. But the issue of primers is actually way more important than I've given time to discuss that. Apart from the coloration aspects. So how do you know that your paint was not going to be as strong? You have to test it. And how are you going to test it if you're just going to take a piece of white styrene sheet or something like that? So you actually need, and I haven't done this, you need a sheet with I don't want to say pen lines. I'm not sure what to actually use there. I mean, pen could do it. You could draw pen lines onto there, but of course the ink will immediately get affected by the thinners, which doesn't matter because it's just a test piece. But ink tends to react way worse. So let's not say that. Maybe when you use a darker color, just spray little bits and blobs onto there, so that when you do your other color tests, you can see whether my dark blue was going to cover a lighter and a darker section evenly, or how much it took. And I wanted a gloss, so now I'm actually faced with what primer could I have used. Now I haven't really spoken properly about this. It's worth you setting aside colors that are a good satin primer, and I'm not sure if really a good matte primer is really something you need to set aside, because matte is very strong in any case. But it might be an idea, particular greys which you just felt sprayed really nicely, did their job perfectly, just make a note for yourself. Put a little sticky note up on the wall about which of your matte greys really worked as a good primer for something that you were doing, matte armor pieces or whatever, and which satin and possibly even gloss grey you chose. And it doesn't have to be a grey. I'm just suggesting grey as the most common of the primer colors. So what I might have done here was chosen a satin blue. In hindsight, I would have actually liked to do that. Satin blue or blue grey, which would have made my gloss blue way easier to spray. Just a warning there that your primer must not be so dark that you struggle to cover it. A nice mid-grey, so that on average pretty much any color can be sprayed over that and converted to that color. But of course that comes down to your practicing on bits, which I didn't do tonight. So I got away with it, but it was a reminder. You get overconfident in your colors. You're quickly looking to pull out one, and the worst that could have happened is I end up with a model that's got gloss blue on it, which I need to wait quite a while for it to dry, but it now needs a primer on it anyway, because you've got light and dark sections shining through. Anyway, it's good. It'll look fine. I'll take a photo of it later, but it's now got to dry. And I have done that in the past. 129, Humbrol 129 was my favorite primer. I'm going to actually choose a few, including glosses now, because I am tending to do more gloss initial on a model. But still, it's quite handy. I do have a 129, but there's actually a few that you can use. I see on people's models that they're busy on, where I should have mentioned this on the previous video, where they're trying to convert either over a brighter colored plastic or away from some previous colored paint. Like for instance, if you'd sprayed one color first, but now you needed to mask off and spray the other color, but you still had overspray, or you hadn't bothered creating that delineation line. So now you've got one color that has to cover another color. And with Humbrols, it's not too bad. I'm very, very used to making statements about Humbrols, but there are colors that I've seen with people, not colors, paint types that I've seen with people's models where I sort of feel sorry for what they're doing, because they're following the correct principle, but those paints are not good. They're too thin, they're too watery, and they're not doing what they're supposed to do, which is one of the reasons that I really like the Humbrol enamels or equivalent enamels from that time. Okay, which brings me to the slightly more important aspect of tonight's talk. I don't have the old Airfix instructions. They're somewhere in a drawer here. I just don't have the time to dig it out right now, but what I was going to do is this one, which is new Airfix. That Hurricane, which I showed you, the Trumpeter Hurricane, and the Spitfire, this Spitfire, which I was talking about, Trumpeter. And I sort of had an idea, apart from what I want to actually speak about, that it would be nice if Airfix was listening and actually offered variations according to what I'm going to say. So when I got this one, I had a particular idea in mind. I wasn't interested in getting into the nitty-gritties of the Hurricane. It was just I wanted to do a large-scale aircraft. It was at a good price, and hence I chose to leave out the engine and I actually show you that. So that's the engine and the cockpit. It's not an overly complicated bunch of parts. It's not an overcomplicated cockpit at all, and it's not an overcomplicated engine. It's just a good enough build to be very nice without going overboard on the parts. So that's already that. And when you get to putting them in, that's what you're putting in. So this Hurricane was an ideal model, being the equivalent of a 1/48th, where you've got your fuselage halves, you can join them together, and you could leave the engine out or put it in. You could leave the cockpit out, or you could put parts of the cockpit in. I chose, for reasons at the time, to glue it together without the cockpit in, because I thought the cockpit and the engine would make a very nice model. I still stand by that because, as I say, this one's going to be on the ceiling for all of its life. It was never intended to be a tabletop model. I just want to do a nice build. So the fuel tanks can be left off without changing the structure. So no structure relies on that. The engine cover panels were a little bit of a hassle. I would have liked that better. And I think, as I said on this one, I could still change my mind on that. I think I was going to put undercarriage down. I'll review that since it's going to be on the ceiling, but I haven't committed to that yet. I haven't closed up anything. So this is a very good characteristic of the trumpeter model that allows you to build a large scale model without making it too complicated, or if you want to open it up, you can put all those things in. And you're not really affecting your model either way. The Spitfire, somewhat similar. So your parts, not a ridiculous amount of parts. This is again it's almost that sweet spot of parts. So you've got cockpit, not just those two pictures. Engine, and the engine's very nice. It's not like they've left things off it, but that's all there was. Now we're on to page 3, and we're getting to the internals. Okay, there's those panels that you glue onto the inside of the doors. Now the Spitfire, I'm not intending to leave the cockpit out. I am building that in, and I'll probably build the engine in, but I have 2 of these Spitfires, so that's what goes on to the inside there. So again, quite an easy choice to include or exclude the engine. And I really like that. But I'll just show you the wings there. But does that, sorry, that was a bit short. I can, I'm not sure if copyright, if anyone takes a fuss if you actually post pictures of these, if I took photos of these planes, I'm sure not. I mean, really. You can leave the guns out. You can close up those panels. It sort of reminds you a lot of the early Airfix Spitfire. You've got the flaps. So I think this is a really, really nice model. And I was sort of thinking, okay, so what does that mean for this one? Does that mean that some 1/24th models are only really for the person that wants to build everything about it? Because this is way overcomplicated. No, I shouldn't say overcomplicated. It is way more complicated. It is for a very... I'll just show you a little bit of this. This is a different category of 1/24th build completely. And of course it costs a whole lot more. But I was now pondering, and if I wish FX would hear this and sort of think about it. I'm not sure if that would be a good business decision. It might be. What if you offered this in 2 variations? They've already done the molds and everything. They've already done a huge amount of work. But what if you offered 2 versions of the kit? One where the person, not for the experienced modeler. They don't want to build 80% of the internals. Just the amount of cockpit and engine that this one had, and make all the sort of detailed construction something that you can offer in 2 kits. Excuse me. The one has got everything that this has got in, and another version where you could build and leave out 80% of that stuff. Give your thoughts on that. I know they'll never do it, but the point here is that to build this one and the new FX Spitfire means that you have got a lot of building to do, more than double the amount of that. But what if you just wanted the 1/24th Spitfire? You didn't want to do the maximum build version of it. And they could, they would sell so many more, so you wouldn't have to have fewer sales, but making more per sale. You could have more sales of two variations and probably make more money overall, I'd say. These instruction booklets are crazy. Look at that thickness. Of course, if this was a Harvard, I would want everything and more, because that's the type of build that I would be wanting to do there. Absolutely everything, but I'd want it to be perfectly correct. So with the Typhoon, I don't want to spend forever building it, and I'm not. The Typhoon is not a model that I want to display with everything open, which it makes you wonder, well, why have you put the engine in? Why have you put all of that spar framework and cockpit framework? So either I just build it very quickly, not worrying about the spar framework and the wings and all of that. Close up the guns. Don't need to see anything in there. You don't need to paint it. Don't need to put some parts in. Don't even put the engine in. Keep that for a separate model. So there are parts of this that I can do that way. But you had to buy the expensive kit to be able to reduce it to a simpler kit. Because a 1/24th doesn't have to be an absolute, a mega complex model. It doesn't have to be the old. Some of the old Airfix ones were actually very achievable in even for kids, I think. I know one of my friends built all of them in primary school even, and painted. I've built the Spitfire and the Mustang. I've now built the Hurricane in Trumpeter. So yeah, give your thoughts on that. It's just interesting, the different approaches, and not necessarily wanting to have to go through such a heavy build process to achieve that. Just because you're doing that big size doesn't mean that you wanted to do so much on the model. Sort of like the 1/32 P47 that I've also got. It's very interesting stuff on the inside, and to be honest, the P47 is a little bit different from many other aircraft. Quite different. So I'm probably going to be learning a lot, and I'd want to include all of those parts. Okay, I think that's it for tonight. Back to the workbench. Happy modeling.